Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Creamsicle Chronicles podcast. My name is JT Olson, and tonight I am a solo host. My normal co-host, Garrett Ballard, is out sick. So we wish him the best. We tried to push our stream back one more night to see if he could recover, but he is just not feeling up to it. So Garrett, hope you're feeling better, bud. But one thing that makes us all feel a little bit better, Saints, Buccaneers coming away with a regular season win, celebrating a victory Thursday tonight, because we don't just stop at Monday. This is a victory all week long. So we are still enjoying a win over the Saints. And it was a very hard-fought win. This was as competitive and nasty and the type of game you would expect from a real NFL rivalry. This was everything that was advertised to be. It was a physical defensive struggle for the entire game. And that's where I want to start, is the Bucs defense. They looked fantastic for the second week in a row. And I don't want anything to be taken away from them because they were playing against Jameis Winston or because Alvin Kamara wasn't in this game, which, that is a valid point, but even so, they had Mark Ingram, who is a NFL caliber running back. He's a starter on a lot of teams. The Bucs looked great. They shut this team down for the entire game. I think the Saints got a touchdown with 3 minutes to go, and it was at a point where the Bucs were up multiple scores, so it wasn't really a relevant touchdown. But this was a team that featured a healthy Michael Thomas, who was the Offensive Player of the Year a few years ago. It's a team that features Chris Olave, who is one of the most explosive rookie wide receivers in the league. He has legitimate 4.3 speed. And it's a team that features a quarterback who, the warts can be ugly, as we've seen firsthand, but the highs are very high. This is a guy who threw for 5,000 yards a few years ago. And yes, he threw the interceptions, but that doesn't take away the positive production he had. 30-plus touchdowns, 5,000 yards. He couldn't do anything against this Bucs defense until the fourth quarter, where what he did was throw interceptions. I think he had under 100 yards going into the fourth quarter, if that tells you anything about how dominant this Bucs defense has been. And it's been everybody. It's been the pass rush, and Shaq Barrett, who had 2 sacks in this game, and Devin White, who had a sack and looked fantastic again. It's been the defensive line. Logan Hall looked good in this game. I think Raheem Nunez-Roches came in off the bench and looked really solid in this game. And the secondary looked great after being what I would say is probably the weak point of this defense for the last several years. They're looking like the strength right now. Carlton Davis is still arguably a top 10 corner in the league. He looks as good as ever. Jamel Dean, he is really establishing himself as a really good corner. And I really thought this was a battle between him and Sean Murphy-Bunting in the offseason. And I really thought Sean Murphy-Bunting could win because he has better ball skills than Dean. At least coming into the year, he's shown that. And Dean is putting away any doubt who the man was to win this job. He is locking everyone down, and he had 2 pivotal game-changing interceptions. One in the end zone to prevent a Saints score, and one to kind of seal the game, really help put it away. So the secondary has been out of this world. Antoine Winfield Jr. moving into that nickel role has been great. Mike Edwards, a pick 6 this week to really ice it, as if there were any doubt at that point. Bucs up 10 points, and then Edwards takes it to the house, makes it to 20-3, and it almost looks like a blowout at that point, which it was not. The game was competitive 90% of the way until the Bucs really blew it open at the end. But the defense, I can't say enough good things about it, and I don't want to take anything away from it from who they played, because they've played quality opponents. These are not bum offenses. This is not the Chicago Bears. This is not the New York Jets. These are good offenses. And I won't say they're great offenses because they're not. The Cowboys are limited. But Dak Prescott, a quality quarterback. CeeDee Lamb, a good wide receiver. Ezekiel Elliott, a good running back. Dalton Schultz, a good tight end. Michael Thomas, a very, very good wide receiver. Chris Olave, a promising young rookie. Jameis Winston, productive, if nothing else. These are quality opponent offenses, and to be allowing less than a touchdown per game, it's really impressive. And if they continue to play like this over the next 2 weeks, it's time to start having legitimate conversations about what this defense could be historically. Because the 2000 Baltimore Ravens only allowed 10 points per game, and that's the fewest points per game over the course of a season ever. 10.3, I believe it is. The Bucs are well ahead of that pace right now. And if they can do that to Aaron Rodgers, 2-time reigning MVP, and Patrick Mahomes, it's time to really look at this defense as potentially being one of the best ever. I don't want to get ahead of myself yet because it's only been 2 games. The sample size just isn't there, but a great start for the Bucs defense, helping them lock down a second win to start out the year. On the other side of the coin, the Buccaneers offense sputtered again. Not a great performance. Week 1, scored 19 points, stalled in the red zone over and over again, 1 touchdown. This week, offense only scored 13 points. And it was looking like they weren't going to score any for most of the game. They got a field goal, and then interception set up a touchdown. But if it weren't for 5 defensive turnovers, this could have been a very different outcome because the offense just did not provide enough. Now, they were shorthanded. Obviously, no Chris Godwin, no Julio Jones. Those are big losses. Mike Evans, he was okay. There's so much made about the Evans-Lattimore rivalry. Who's going to get the edge? Evans did all right. He had 60-some yards, 3 catches. Didn't do a ton, but he led the team in receiving. And, he had the pivotal play in the game with the fight with Marshawn Lattimore. So not something you'll see in the box score, but I think it's a reflection of how the team rallies around him as a leader. The rest of the team did not show a lot. Russell Gage, I think he had 5 catches for maybe 30-some yards. I was expecting a lot more from Russell Gage in this game. Felt like a natural game for him to step up, take that Chris Godwin slot role, really be fed a lot of targets, and he just wasn't that productive. And maybe that's a chemistry, a trust issue with Brady. Maybe that was just a function of this week's game plan. But it felt like a natural time for Gage to step up and make an impact, and he just didn't. Scotty Miller got a lot of targets, and he didn't have a ton of production. Jalen Darden felt like a no-show. The tight ends, Cam Brate, he had 1 key play where he drew a personal foul on the other team to get a first down, extend the drive. But other than that, not a lot of impact from any of the tight ends outside of the blocking ability from a guy like O'Keefe. Rachaad White has felt non-existent so far to start the year, which I think part of that is a limited number of touches. I'd like to see him get a little bit more. But even when he's been in there, he hasn't done much, which, again, sample size, don't want to judge him harshly, but you'd like to see more from him. Leonard Fournette, he was okay, but he just didn't have a lot of running room in this game. And that goes back to the offensive line, who I thought played admirably with no Donovan Smith. Josh Wells went out in the first half, and the Bucs had to make do with their 3rd-string left tackle, Brandon Walton. And honestly, I didn't think he was a problem. I thought he had a really admirable, solid effort. There was no moment where I watched him and found him to be a total liability. So for where the Bucs are with their offensive line, 2 guys making their 2nd NFL start in Robert Hainsey and Luke Gedeke, and a 3rd-string offensive tackle making up the left half of your line, I thought they did pretty well. Tristan Wirfs, Shaq Mason, they were as good as you'd want them to be. The Saints got 1 sack in this game, and it was kind of a cheap sack. Now it was 2 yards. Brady tried to step up in the pocket, maybe pick up a few yards with his feet, and he just kind of ran into a sack. So it was not a great showing by the offense. I thought the line looked better than I expected, but overall there is a lot to improve here. And it will improve. I'll start there. Donovan Smith may be coming back this week. Luke Gedeke, Robert Hainsey, gaining more experience. They're going to get better the more they play. You know, we talk about guys getting reps, guys getting experience. You can't simulate that. Not versus NFL competition. Practice is not live game reps. So the more they see, the more they experience, the better this group is going to get. And that's all we can hope for, is just constant improvement. Week 1, I thought they did a really nice job run blocking. This week, I thought they did a better job pass blocking, maybe a little less on the run blocking. Next week, you kind of hope it's a little bit solid on both fronts. Good job pass blocking, decent job run blocking, and slowly just kind of grow and grow and grow and hope this team hits its stride late in the season. That's the overall goal. The goal is not beating the Saints in week 2. It's not beating the Cowboys in the opening game. It's not beating the Packers next week. This is a team that's Super Bowl or bust. That's all that matters. Line's got to gain chemistry, got to gain experience, got to gel at the right time. The receivers have to come back healthy at the right time and hit their stride going in the playoffs. So it's great to get a win from this team with no Chris Godwin, with no Julio Jones, Mike Evans being ejected. That's great, even with a sputtering offense, because you feel confident the offense is going to get better, and that's what matters. Improvement moving towards the postseason. So overall, good, hard-fought win. Saints are one of the best teams in the NFC. The Rams have looked up and down. The Packers really sputtered out of the gate after before they beat a bad Bears team this week. Not sure what they are yet. Saints have looked good. Their defense is very stout. This isn't just a Bucs problem. It's also a great Saints defense. Might be the best secondary in the NFL. We know what Cam Jordan does. One of the better pass rushers in the league. This defense is everything I expected it to be. And the Bucs getting a win in New Orleans, that's huge. Puts them up early in the division, sets them up nicely for a position to be in home field advantage, because the other teams you expect them to compete with all have a loss on their resume. Packers, Rams, they're looking up at the Bucs right now. It's where you want to be at this point in the year. Where I didn't want us to be at this point of the year. Going in against a Packers team who is one of the best in the NFC, shorthanded. Julio Jones hasn't practiced this week. He was a game-time decision last week. I'm not sure what the status of his knee is, but I know he's not practicing. Could that be precautionary? Could that be the veteran treatment? Perhaps. But if he doesn't play in this game, it could be a problem, because I find it very unlikely that Chris Godwin plays. They want to ease him back in from that hamstring injury. Mike Evans, we know, is not playing. Suspended 1 game for his fight with Marshawn Lattimore. And with that, I'm fine with that suspension. Evans rushed in, bodied Marshawn Lattimore. He leveled him. It was great to watch as a fan, but in reality, can't be doing that. That's something that draws a flag. It draws an ejection. And because it's not the first time he's done that to Lattimore, it draws a suspension. I get it. I have no issue with it. I'm happy with it because I think it was a pivotal play to get the Bucs a win in week 2. I'm bummed with it now because now they got to play Green Bay with no Mike Evans. And that's a bummer. But it is what it is. It'd be less impactful if Godwin and Jones played, but we don't know if they will. So this could be an offense that features Russell Gage, impactful, Scotty Miller, who was a bubble roster guy, Rashad Perriman, who was a bubble roster guy, and potentially a new signing could be featured in this game, Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley was signed off the streets to the practice squad, and there's a chance he's elevated for this game. Now, Cole Beasley made his name with Dallas, a gritty slot guy, makes a lot of tough catches, real Adam Humphrey type. Did the same with the Bills. Again, makes a lot of tough catches. He really does a good job over the middle as a slot receiver. He's not a burner. He's not a game breaker. He's a great pair of hands. He's gritty. He's tough. He's quick. He could potentially make an impact. Will he? I don't know. I don't know if he'll be up for this game. I don't know where he's at in his conditioning because it's week 2 of the NFL season and he was just signed off the streets. Is he game shape? Probably not. Is he mentally ready for football? I don't know. But he is someone who has been there. He's done that. He's proven in this league that he's a good player. So if he is your slot, Gage and Miller and Perriman are kind of guys rotating in and out of the outside, is that enough for the Bucs to be a potent offense? It's hard to feel confident with it going against the Packers defense, but we'll see. Before I talk more about the Packers, a couple of things I wanted to note. Bucs had a few players go on IR this week. We saw Giovanni Bernard. He's hurt, injured reserve. He'll be out for a while. We also saw Akeem Hicks. I think he had a torn ligament in his foot. Adam Schefter reported that he'll be out at least a month. He said a month. I say at least a month because you're talking a foot injury for a guy who's 350 pounds. There's a good chance that turns into a 6-7 week injury, especially for a guy like Hicks who has a history of getting hurt. It might take him a while for his body to heal. He's been hurt the last several years. Do I have a ton of faith he'll bounce back quickly? I don't. I think he'll probably be gone for 6 weeks or so. We'll see. Maybe a month. Maybe I'm wrong. But I wouldn't count on him being back soon. Which, again, is fine because this Bucs defense is so good it can take the hit. And if he comes back healthy for a playoff push, that's what matters. But the Bucs will be without him for at least a month. Giovanni Bernard will be on for a while, which means that Keyshawn Vaughn will be active on game days. Bucs are carrying 3 running backs. All 3 will probably be active, ready to go this week versus the Packers. Bucs also called up Deidre Sanat from their practice squad to replace Akeem Hicks. He'll be the 6th defensive lineman in the rotation. I don't anticipate him playing a lot. I think we're going to see a ton of Vita Vea, a ton of Will Golston, a lot of Raheem Nunez-Roches, and hopefully a lot more Logan Hall, who has looked good in the first 2 games. That's your bread and butter. That's a really strong rotation. Raheem Nunez-Roches, he's a really good run defender. He's been our backup nose tackle. So I think this is a good rotation going against this Packers defense, or Packers offense rather, because this is a group that wants to run the ball. The Packers, they have Aaron Jones and they have A.J. Dillon, 2 high-quality running backs. Jones is their guy. He's their bell cow. And A.J. Dillon is like 240 pounds off the bench. So right when you think you're getting a breath of fresh air, you're getting a boulder rolling down the hill. So the Bucs are really going to have to prioritize stopping the run this week. With a guy like Raheem Nunez-Roches and Vita Vea in the middle, they can do that. We've seen what this Bucs defense can do versus the run in the last several years. Since V has come to town, this has been a dominating run defense. This is 700 pounds of beef between the tackles. It's hard to get push. And then behind them, you've got probably the best linebacking duo in the league with Levante David and Devin White. So I think Nunez-Roches going into the starting lineup this week might be a blessing in disguise because Hicks had not looked great versus the run so far. He's a great pass rusher, but he was getting moved on double teams, which you wouldn't necessarily expect from a guy who's 350 pounds, but that was the way of it. He was getting pushed back, and teams were running on the Bucs a little bit, at least more than we've seen in recent years. So Nunez Roches filling in that starting spot. We know he's a good run defender. We know what Vita Vea is versus the run. This might be, at least for this week, a blessing in disguise. Also, we have to talk about Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, 4-time MVP, 1-time Super Bowl champion, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. He struggled versus the Bucs. He has not had a historically good career coming to Tampa Bay. Last time we saw him, he put up, I believe, 10 points total and was intercepted a couple of times. I think one by Mike Edwards, one by Jamel Dean, both of whom he's going to see this weekend in Tampa Bay. What he's not going to see is his star receiver, Devontae Adams. Packers lost him in the offseason. He went to Oakland, or Las Vegas now, playing with the Raiders and Derek Carr. Packers really didn't do much to fill that void. They still have Allen Lazard, who was their number 2. They brought in Sammy Watkins, who has had an incredibly up and down career. He has not lived up to that top 10 hype that he came into the league with. They drafted a couple of promising rookies who I like. Christian Watson out of, I believe it's North Dakota State, is an athletic freak. He just huge, runs fast, a Calvin Johnson-esque athlete. Yeah, that gets your attention. That gets my attention. It's hard to match up with that kind of athlete. But Jamel Dean is a guy who can. I think he's 6'2", 4'3" speed. And he doesn't have to worry about a lot of routes from Watson because Watson came into the league pretty raw coming from a D2 college. The other one, Romeo Doubs. I think he's a really interesting rookie. Between these two guys, I think one of them will hit. I'm not sure which one because Watson's got the incredibly high upside. Doubs has looked good so far. But both of whom are players who can hurt the Bucs. Do I think they will? Honestly, I don't. I think this Bucs secondary is too good. But when you're talking about Aaron Rodgers, you know he's going to maximize the talent he has around him. He's done it his whole career. He's going to make Sammy Watkins a number 1 receiver. He's going to find Romeo Doubs in space. He's going to throw it up to Allen Lazard, and these guys are going to try and make a play for their quarterback. Just like everyone says, they want to step up their game for Tom Brady. They want to block better for the GOAT. They want to give everything they can for Brady. Aaron Rodgers is that kind of heir. He's that kind of player. Everyone wants to step up to make a play for Rodgers. They want to block better for Rodgers. He's one of the best ever. So I think he will maximize the talent. I don't think he'll put up a ton of points in this game, but I do think it's going to be a more explosive offensive output than we've seen the first 2 weeks. I don't think we're holding this team to 10. Offensively, I look at their offensive line. A lot of the names we've seen there in years past aren't there anymore. We have David Bakhtiari, who I don't believe is active yet. And we have Elton Jenkins, who has come into the league since 2019, and he's been a really good player. He's kind of moved all up and down the line for them, and he's done a really good job, particularly as a run blocker. Beyond that, there are not a lot of familiar names. Royce Newman, Josh Myers, John Runyon. These are starting guys on their offensive depth chart. And some of these guys I watched in college, and they were nice college players and guys who were developmental prospects. But I don't look at this as a offensive line who I think is going to come in and dominate the Bucs defensive line. Even guys who I really liked in this year's class, Sean Ryan, who I had a first-round grade on. Zach Tom, I thought was a really good steal for them in the 4th round. I don't think either of those guys are going to play. They're not listed as starters on the depth chart. And even if they were, you don't want your first NFL action against Vita Vea, one of the best defensive tackles in the league. So I think this could be a point where the Bucs have a strong advantage. Bucs defensive line, Shaq Barrett, Vita Vea, Will Golston, Logan Hall, and then, of course, blitzing linebackers. Devin White has 3 sacks so far this year. I think these guys are going to be a menace for the Packers' offensive line, and I don't really think there's a ton they can do to stop it. Sure, they can keep their running backs in to block chip, what have you. But your running backs are your best playmakers. You want to get them out in space. You want to get them screens. You want to throw it to them in the flat. You don't want to keep them in constantly to block because you don't have the pass catchers to move the ball if you're not using your running backs that way. So I think it's going to put the Packers in a really difficult spot. And I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be hit a lot in this game. So there is something I think the Bucs have a big advantage in. I think their defense is going to continue to dominate to a lesser degree, but I think this is still going to be a really strong defensive showing. Offensively, it could be another game where they struggle. And I think we're going to see a lot of Leonard Fournette again. I know there's been a lot of complaints about the play calling, how many touches he's getting, when he's getting them, a lot of first down carries. I think we're going to see more of it this week. I don't expect that to change. Packers defensive line is kind of undersized. I think across the board, they're all 300 pounds. Dean Lowry, Kenny Clark, Jaron Reed. I think they're all 300 pounds, which isn't small. But when you're talking about a 300-pound nose tackle, a 300-pound three technique, it's not big. And Ken Clark, I want to say, he is one of the best nose tackles in the league, particularly as a pass rusher. He is not someone I just want to gloss over on this Packers defense. And I think that's another reason to protect Tom Brady by running the ball. You don't want the best pass rushing nose tackle going against a pair of interior linemen who have 2 career starts. This is not where you want Robert Hainsey to prove he's the guy. You want to ease him into this. You want to ease Gedeke into this. There's no need to put added pressure on them to protect Tom Brady against one of the better pass rushers at this position. So I think we'll see a lot of Leonard Fournette running the ball against a smaller defensive front. I think they're going to test these Packers linebackers, who I think are really good. Devondre Campbell, we saw him for years in Atlanta. We have Quay Walker, who is a rookie. I think they'll probably try and see what he's got, see if he's NFL ready. And I think he's looked good so far this year. But again, it's a sample size. 2 games, you don't really know what you have there. So I think the Bucs are going to try and run the ball. I think they're probably going to try and run it to the outside. And I think they're going to try and get their guards in space on these linebackers. Because we've seen Luke Gedeke play really well when he's on the move, on pulls, getting to the second level. That's where he shines. And I think that's where he can have an advantage against these linebackers. Another reason I don't want to see the Bucs throw the ball as much as some do this week, this Packers secondary is good. This is a very good Packers secondary. It's a very good defense overall. Their back 7, I think, is one of the best in the league. But the secondary in particular, I really like. Jari Alexander is one of my favorite corners in the league. He's a little bit small, and if we had Mike Evans in this game, it might be a little bit of a different feeling. But you feel like Jari Evans is going to shut anyone down who's put on him. Darnell Savage, I think, is one of the most underrated safeties in the league. He is fast. He is physical. He has ball skills. He's a really, really good player. Adrian Amos is a really physical box defender. He is a quality, strong safety. This is a deep, talented Packers secondary. And with a young offensive line who's inexperienced, lacking wide receivers, and a good opposing secondary, I just don't see the Bucs throwing the ball a ton in this game. I think probably 25, 30 times. Running the ball, probably close to as much as they pass it. And honestly, I think that's fine for this week. I think that can be a recipe for success versus this team. Both teams are going to want to run the ball. I think the Bucs will have success with it, and I don't think the Packers will. I don't think either team will be particularly successful throwing the ball. So I think this is going to be another defensive game. I think it'll probably be in the low 20s, high teens for both teams. I could easily see this being a 20-23 victory for the Bucs. 20-17 victory for the Bucs. Something like that. And I do think it's a game the Bucs should win. And I know the Packers are one of the best in the NFC. They're hungry because they dropped a game early in the year. They want to keep up with the contenders. Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers. This defense is very good. But I think the Bucs, even with their offensive struggles, are still a tier above. I think Tom Brady is going to maximize his talent just like Aaron Rodgers will. So you're going to see plays from Russell Gage and Scotty Miller and Cade Otton. Not household names. I think you're going to step up and make a few plays in this game. I think you're going to see Leonard Fournette really earn his contract. He got paid this offseason, and I think the coaches are ready to lean on him. They've given him a ton of touches so far to start the year. I don't see why they're going to stop here. This is an ideal game to feed Lenny. And I'd love to see get a little more Rachaad White in there too. Throw him the ball in the flat, throw it to him for a screen. He's a good pass catcher. And then run with him. It doesn't all have to be Leonard Fournette. There are touches to go around. Now, we can definitely talk about when we call what plays. It doesn't have to be a run on first down all the time. You want to keep the opponent guessing. You want to keep the defense on its heels. If they're expecting a run first down, it's easier to stop. So play calling, yes, I think we can all agree has not been great. I think it'll be similar, but I'd like to see it varied a little bit more. A couple of first down passes, a couple of quick hitters. Just flip it out to Scotty Miller. Flip it out to Jalen Darden. We've seen him do it with Chris Godwin all the time. Godwin's not here. Doesn't mean that play has to go away. That is a quick 5, 6, 7, 8 yard gain. A guy like Scotty Miller can break it open. Get the ball, throw it. Keep the defense on its heels. So, love to see more of that. I do think we will see a little bit more of that as this offense continues to gel and evolve. But again, I think it's going to be a lot of the same. A few bold predictions. Garrett and I have gotten in the habit of doing bold predictions for this game and every game we preview. A few bold predictions for this Bucs versus Packers game. Number one, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have multiple turnovers. I don't know if it's going to be a fumble because his offensive line can't protect him. We've seen him throw interceptions versus this Bucs defense. This Todd Bowles defense has his number. I think that's going to continue. So, prediction number one, Aaron Rodgers, multiple turnovers. Prediction number two, the winner doesn't have to beat more than 20. I think it's going to be just like last week. 20 points, I think, will win this game. I can see this 20-13, 20-10, 17-10. I don't think it'll be high scoring. And I do think it can be 20-21, 20-23. But I think the Bucs defense is going to be that dominating again. And I've really talked myself into it the more I've thought about it. And third hot take for this game, I'm going to say Leonard Fournette, 2 touchdowns against a stout Packers defense. I think he's going to run all over them. I do. This Bucs offensive line is growing, but we've seen them run the ball effectively in week 1. I think they're going to do that again this week versus a smaller Packers front. 100 yards, 2 touchdowns for Leonard Fournette. So those are my bold takes for this game. Final score, I'll say it's going to be 23-20 Packers, or 23-20 Buccaneers. I think Packers get a late touchdown to make it look closer than it is because Aaron Rodgers is going to try and keep them in it. But I think it's going to be a fairly comfortable win. I think last week's game will be more competitive. I think the Saints might be better than the Packers at this point. And I think this is going to be a really good win for the Bucs. Now, I don't want to rule the Packers out. That's not to say that they're not a good team. Again, I think they're the best team in the NFC North. I think they're a playoff team. But the Bucs are better at every phase. I trust the quarterback more. Even without their top receivers, I think these receiving cores are comparable. Running game is comparable. Offensive line is comparable. And then the Bucs defense is just better. Better defensive line, better linebackers. And if the secondary keeps playing like it is, it's a better secondary. So that's my podcast for tonight. No Garrett, so it's a little bit shorter, a little bit less back and forth. So we'll wrap it up there. You can find all of our written work at bucksreport.com. You can find all of our podcasts at the Around the Block Network. I am JT Olson. You can find me at Twitter at IcewaterOlson. Until next week, go Bucs.